Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us in our live stream on framing the conversation for women in business. Before we begin, we'll just do a few housekeeping, a bit of housekeeping. First of all, you have Q&A opportunity towards the end of the session. We'll dedicate the last 20 minutes of our session to answering your question and addressing your thoughts. So please feel free to comment as we go. And you'll also find a link to register to any upcoming conversations at the Capital Club, as well as getting more information on the Capital Club in the comments section as well. So feel free to check that out as well. Before we begin, the live stream is hosted by the Women in Business Committee. So we'd like to give an opportunity to the members of the committee to each introduce themselves. So we'll start with Laudi.
Good morning. So my name is Laudi Lahto. I have been based in Dubai for the last almost 2 decades with my family. I'm a mother of 2 young adult children. And like most people, thought that I would be out here for 2 to 5 years, and 20 years later, we're still in Dubai. I've dedicated almost 2 decades to being a facilitator of SME and enterprise level businesses, having worked across a spectrum of challenges that impact business from startup to operations, growth, scaling into new markets and profitability. In the corporate world, I was the former MD of Surf Corp for almost 16 years. I've worked in advisory roles, assisting CEOs to help set strategy and expand into new markets and scale business. I worked with a number of international law firms on governance projects related to family office. And at the moment, I am the CEO of companies creating change, supporting entrepreneurs to scale their business and have a positive impact on the community. I'm super passionate about diversity and inclusion. So I am on the advisory board of TARA, and the goal is to connect and power connections between the corporate world and final year master's students. I sit on the core steering committee of the 30% Club for the MENA region, leading the Women on Boards initiative that I'm super passionate about. And I'm a former board member of Reach Mentoring.
Thank you, Laudi. And we'll go on to Frida.
Thanks for that. My name is Frida. I'm Swedish by origin. I am married to a Brit. We have 3 kids, and we have been in Dubai for the past 7 years. I have always been a sales leader or a partner leader in corporate environments, mainly in IT. I currently work for Microsoft, where I'm the partner leader for Middle East and Africa for software vendors. I come from a background in Cisco and Dell, and I am super passionate about women in technology, but overall women in business. And I think it's a fantastic environment to be where you can thrive. And that's also why I'm part of this committee.
And Greg?
My name is Greg Jasmine. I'm originally from the States. Been here in the region for the last 10 years with my family. Spent 20 years in the corporate world. So from an intern to managing director of a large US engineering company. And for the last 5 years, I've been on my journey of entrepreneurship. First, starting a consulting company, and more recently, co-founding a hyperscale data center service provider here in the region, focusing on the region as well as Africa. So I'm really passionate about the role of women in entrepreneurship, or their move from corporate to entrepreneurship, and the lessons learned from that. So I'm very I'm excited to be part of this committee and to bring another perspective to the table.
Yes, hi everyone. I'm Irma Khan. I'm a newer resident of Dubai. I've been in Dubai now for about 3 years. I moved to Dubai on an international assignment. So I was lucky enough to get an international assignment based here in Dubai. For the last 17 years, I've been working with Caterpillar. We are the world's largest manufacturer of construction, mining, and power systems equipment. And that is where my journey started after graduating with an engineering degree from school. I've been with Caterpillar for that period of time and then moved to Dubai through an international assignment there. So since my journey began with Caterpillar, I've always been involved in the sales and marketing space. I moved to Dubai with a view of distributor development here in the region. But since then, I've moved to the digital operations space. And now for Europe, Africa, Middle East, and Eurasia, I focus on developing our distributor capabilities, especially in the very important digital field of industrial IoT. Personally, I'm very passionate also, as many of our Women in Business Committee members are, about diversity and inclusion. And I've had a good gender advocacy journey also, but within Caterpillar as well. Right now, I'm the chair of the Women's Initiative Network for the Dubai chapter, which I founded. And that really is a good platform for us to raise the voices of women in the region and beyond. Previously, I've also been a member of the Society of Women Engineers. One of my passions is also advocating for women in STEM, where we need more women participation in those areas as well. And really my personal mission, I would say, is about financial independence for women. That is what I want to see. That is really what I believe in, and is really a driver for my passion of women being in business, for women being in STEM, and for gender parity. And I'm very excited to have this conversation today with you.
Thank you, Irma. And last but not least, Anusha.
Oh, thank you. My name is Anusha Iqbal. My career has primarily been in financial services. Prior to Dubai, I was doing investment banking in New York. I've been in Dubai since 2007. When I moved, I joined a private equity firm that was looking at doing investments across the emerging markets. So got some pretty good exposure there in a industry that was fairly male-dominated. I did that for about 11 years. Over the last year, I started my entrepreneurial journey and founded a fintech business. It's been an interesting transition, but what I've really enjoyed is meeting people from lots of different backgrounds and getting different perspectives. What I really want to try and bring to the discussion is, well, my own experiences. What was it like in the corporate world? How is that transition? Why did I move to my own startup, and how has that been different? And what are we really trying to do to facilitate not just the startup ecosystem here, but from a female founder's perspective? Because I think that is a unique perspective that comes to the table. This committee has been extremely interesting, just because I think these conversations are important to be had as in order to raise the awareness of topics. Over my career, I don't think I've come across a platform that has been able to give voice to these kinds of subjects, and I'm quite excited to be here. Also, whenever I get into these conversations, I always think about my kids. I think I have two children. My youngest is a daughter, and I want her to get into a world where we've moved forward from these conversations, and it's no longer something that we need to continue constantly debating and worrying about where we've come. But she enters into a workforce that's very different from where I was, say, 10 years ago or 20 years ago. Yeah. So really excited to be here and really looking forward to all the discussions and conversations.
Thank you, Anusha. And we want to also make sure that everyone in the audience is aware of what the objective of this committee is. And the Women in Business Committee at the Capital Club has a mission to become a platform for meaningful conversations between men and women on topics that we really need to be addressing. And while we might be touching the surface on a lot of these topics, we want to create a space where we can share our thoughts, we can share our perspectives, and really try to drive change in our business communities. And now, as you can see, we all come from different backgrounds, different industries. We come with our different set of expertise and perspectives, and at very different points in our careers. But what really brings us together is this collective ambition to drive this mission, and to involve the wider community and the regulatory community in our region. And what do you think? I mean, how can we work with the government in the UAE to drive any of this change?
In fact, we've been very fortunate. We've had numerous conversations with government. They've been a tremendous support. And I think what's really important here is that government have been very intentional and very active listeners. And when we meet with ministers here, the Capital Club has provided us with a platform where we will meet with ministers, we will meet with senior government officials, and the active listening to say, you as business leaders know the challenges that exist within your own sectors. We would like you to recommend the solutions, and we're all ears. So we've seen numerous examples of this here at the club. A couple of months ago, we had His Excellency Abdullah bin Turk, the Minister of Economy, meeting with business leaders, CEOs, and champions within their own industries, actually encouraging the discussion and the dialogue around the challenges and requesting solutions. There was a lot of note-taking, and we actually saw real change. I know I personally raised the topic of diversity across many, many fields, and the minister actually said to me, hold on, there's change coming. And a few weeks ago, we saw the most recent law around mandating every publicly listed company in the UAE must have at least one woman on their board. So these changes are coming. Government is listening. We had Mohammed Al-Shaal, CEO of the Economic Department of Dubai, also having a majlis with senior business leaders of global corporations with regional mandates, actively listening when asking questions. What are the challenges you face in your own industry? And they can be as small as visa issues for their employees. Whatever the issues are, tell us what the solutions are. What happens within your own countries that you feel is best practice and can ease the pain of your business. And I think most recently, a couple of weeks ago on the entrepreneurship side, we actually had the privilege of the presence of the Minister of Entrepreneurship and SMEs and engaging. I think we had over 100 attendees engaging with the ecosystem of venture capitalists, entrepreneurs, and the government and the minister were actively encouraging voices around policy recommendation. And so these conversations happen at the club. So I feel for me, it's the accessibility or the ease of accessibility and that active listening to take action.
So we have the Capital Club is really acting as a conduit for these conversations and giving us a platform to be able to drive the change. So I'll start with the first question to the committee. So what are the most important conversations that we need to be having now and why? And I'll pick on Irma to start with this one.
Oh my, okay, all right. Well, thank you, Noura. And I guess my answer has been formulated based a lot on questions that I've personally received, especially, or I would say in the last decade or so. But it's certainly no surprise or small fact that women in larger numbers are opening their own enterprises today, right? So there's a drive for entrepreneurship. It's the new hot thing to do right now. But corporations today still employ a large number of people, including women across the world. And there are individuals like me that have decided to stay the corporate path. And so I believe an important conversation that we should have today is, if you've decided to stay in the corporate path, how not just to survive, but to thrive in that path, right? Yeah. Because that's the path that you have picked. And whatever path that each of us have picked, we should strive to reach our own fullest potential in that path. Yeah. And so I think anything related to the topics that are important for women when moving along that corporate path is important to me. And that can include a myriad of different conversations. Working like I do in STEM field or in male-dominated industries, working in emerging markets, how to get a profit and loss accountability type of role, a field role, sales and marketing role, how to get an international assignment if that is on your corporate path. All of those are topics that may be interested for women working in the corporate world, and those are what would be most important to me. But at the same time, I do recognize that those who have chosen the corporate path very much still have an entrepreneurial spirit. as I do. And that is another very important series of conversations that we should have, is while you're staying on this corporate path, how can you foster your internal entrepreneurial spirit? This should not be a place where your entrepreneurial spirit goes to get crushed.
Yeah.
You should foster that. And truly, corporations today, I cannot stress this enough, need entrepreneurs within their organizations to be competitive today. So important. And that's where entrepreneurs come in, where you are acting as an entrepreneur, but within your corporation, to launch new businesses, to start new ventures. And that's very much possible today and should absolutely be a topic of discussion for the Women in Business Committee.
Actually, Irma, on that point, I think corporations no longer have a choice.
No.
I mean, the disruption that we have seen prior to the pandemic, during the pandemic, the startups that have come to solve so many challenges that structured, rigorous, large corporations could not be agile enough to solve, we're seeing through entrepreneurs. And you raise a very valid point, because innovation is the key to thriving and remaining sustainable as a corporation. So how do you foster that innovation and that spirit of entrepreneurship within a corporate? Because the challenges are there, and the solutions are also within.
They have to now to survive.
It's not a choice.
Yes.
Yeah, and Irma, you talk about entrepreneurship being a hot topic. A lot of people, want to get into this space, and it is interesting because that's where change will come from. And I do completely agree with what you and Laudi said in terms of having that spirit internally. But what I've seen over the last couple of years, particularly in the region, is that the infrastructure to allow people to get out and start their own businesses has also started to mature, and that's been great for people like myself. But that also comes with its own set of challenges. And I think part of what I would love to have a broader conversation and we take this forward is to actually understand what are those challenges, how can you improve them, and then have those challenges also viewed from a gender lens, right? Women have very unique challenges when they try and take that journey, when they step out of the corporate world. And to a large extent, the corporate world does afford its own protection around certain aspects, and you kind of are out in your own world, in your own field, kind of go and do your own thing. How does that impact a person? And I'd love to sort of take that conversation forward as we frame the discussions through this committee.
And I think you're in a unique position because you have indeed transitioned from corporate.
She's gone through the journey.
And
I think you said something really important. Yes, business needs to view this through a gender lens, but at the same time, women are part of the solution. They're not a problem. Yeah. So I think when businesses start to identify the opportunities that exist from a commercial perspective for seeing business or viewing business and opportunities through a gender lens, that's when it makes sense. It impacts the bottom line.
Yes, and corporations are making great strides also in allowing us to incorporate our passions. Each of us have individual passions for gender advocacy. This is very much possible through corporations today. Caterpillar, as an example, recently just released our first diversity and inclusion report, where we put our figures and our statistics out there for everybody to see. So it's the start of a conversation, but it's a very important start, and this is happening more and more so at corporations around the world. Wouldn't you agree, Frida?
Yeah, I was kind of dying to really interject here with your story. I think what's the most important for me here, Nora, and building on what Irma has said, is that I have also always been part of corporations. And it's always at the younger age, I was puzzled to see that not more women were joining these type of companies. And I couldn't really see the responsibility the corporation had. Now with the years of experience and the years of work and having been part of many tech companies in this case, I can see that the corporation has a big responsibility to show that you can have this amazing career, that you can thrive, that you have a voice, that you have a seat at the table. And now lately, I've been fortunate to work for Microsoft for 3 years. We have very much diversity and inclusion on the agenda. It's part of the KPI of managers, and you have to interview a diverse set of panels before you are deciding on the final candidate. And it brings me to a thing that happened here in the Capital Club a while ago when I had the opportunity to be in this panel called Champions of Change. And that also shows that this is actually across businesses. Mm-hmm. So why I want to talk about this thing in this committee is that it's not only in tech, it's with lawyers, it's with doctors, it's with, and we still don't really maybe show the potential you have as an individual. And being able to work with your expanded self and come to work as the person you are and not diminish yourself, but actually thrive, like Irma said, that is really, really top of mind for me. So for me, it's more that the corporation has a responsibility. We have to have champions of change, and the company can do a lot.
And it's so important, Frida, following what you're saying, it's so important for these champions of change, these corporate leaders, to actually discuss what worked within their own organizations, be very authentic about sharing data of the improvements in bottom line, in talent retention, employee retention, attracting new talent, etc. Because I think it takes some of those leaders or some of those champions of change to really influence what others are doing out there. I don't think it's so much that business leaders don't want to do this, but I think it's amplifying the impact when you see more and more business leaders connecting, networking, and discussing what worked for them, what didn't work for them, because we're not on our own. We all live in this community, whether it be a business community, and it's super important to be sharing our ideas, our solutions.
Yeah.
So that takes me to a very interesting part of the conversation to follow up on what Anusha said. It's understanding the journey, the whys.
Yeah.
You know, why did a woman decide to transition from corporate to the journey of entrepreneurship? Is it the desire to create something that they couldn't create within the corporate, or was it potentially reaching a glass ceiling, or none of the above? By happenstance that they kind of stumbled into this journey? So understanding that why. So part of the discussion that I will be leading is to go a little bit in depth on the why behind that transition, but also the lessons learned. What have you carried with you from the corporate side to the entrepreneur side of the business, where you say, you know what, I want the team that I create to have these characteristics? Or on the reverse side, the ability to say, I don't want these characteristics to be part of my team. If you have to create your team purposefully from design day one, what are the things that you're taking with you, the lessons learned you're taking with you from corporate, to make sure that's incorporated into your team? So we have a panel discussion coming up the second week of June, which will dive into a little bit of the whys as well as the lessons learned. So that's part of the dialogue that I would like to see that we have around the table. It's specific to women in business, women founders that have decided to take that transition.
Incredible. And I mean, I realized that I didn't actually do my introduction and the areas or the discussions that I want to bring up. And I'll bring it up now because obviously I have a passion for helping young women go into these leadership positions, and highlighting and showcasing women that have really made a lot of change, which is, so we're kind of earmarking this as like a change makers roundtable, and we want to be hosting these conversations with these remarkable young women that have created a lot of change for our community. So I think what I would love to understand from all of you is, how do you encourage or how do you support young women into these leadership positions? We already know it's hard enough for women in corporations. We're having these conversations because we want to, break that glass ceiling or help to see women in higher positions. So when females do reach those positions, is there an onus on them to help support younger generations, or what do you think? Like, how do you see this? Irma, you're shaking your head.
Yeah, And I'll share with you, Nora, my advice because I meet with a lot of women who are just joining the working world, whether it's Caterpillar or elsewhere. And I always tell them the same thing. Your career is a part of your life. You give so much of your time to it. So what's really important is that this is a marathon. It's a journey which will evolve and develop. But for me, the most important thing, and this is particularly true for women, is be true to yourself. Stay on that path, and women will stay on that path. So as long as they can be their authentic selves on that path. So when Gregory asked the question, what is that? Why is there a transition? Why do some people decide to stay in one company? Some people decide to move around to multiple companies. Some people decide to join completely new industries. I really do believe is, and I hope that that's one of the reasons why, is because they're trying to stay true to themselves, and they want to thrive in an environment, and that's where you will thrive, is when you can be your true authentic self. There's only one of you in the whole world, so it's best if you are just being one of you, right? And that would be my guidance to young women, is there should be an inner voice that's guiding you to say, is this allowing me to be my true authentic self? And if it is, great, pursue that path. If it's not, then listen a little bit closely. Where can you go that fulfills?
Can I add to this one? Yeah. I think when I joined these type of companies earlier, I think it was very, very important to have a role model. Yes. I really love that you're bringing this up. And if I wouldn't have had a mentor or a role model, or seeing that other women, senior women, had these leadership roles, especially in those areas that was maybe not HR or admin or marketing, it was more frontline, VP, country managers, head of sales, etc. That was a very, very important part, I think. So that's why also I want to give that back now. I see that I can play a role in this now, and I can give that back, mentor younger women who are interested in asking, how did you get here? What did you do to get here? How did you make it work with your work-life balance, with family, etc., other things. And I know we will touch on this later. But the other one I'm thinking of is that builds a bit on what Irma is saying. Leadership is a role on its own. I think just because you're a great salesperson, you might not be a good sales leader. If you're a good marketeer, you might not be a good marketing manager. People's leadership is really kind of a skill on its own.
And it's changing, Frida.
And it's really changing. And I think it's, now you have to manage remote teams. Now you have to manage. So I think why do you want to be a manager or leader versus an individual contributor? And that is not, let's say, a status thing or a level thing, because if you're a leader, you spend a lot of time developing and nurturing and empowering others. It's not so much about your own, let's say, it's not, the lights are not on you, the lights are on your team, and it's the high performing team. So I think that's where the why is also on the actual leader role.
And the leader's role is so significant in today's world. It's leadership traits, or traits of a successful leader, are very different to what they were even a couple of years ago. Not only is it about agility and about listening, it's about your people. So leaders are on show, and we all know that culture and the tone for change is set at the top. So unless a leader of an organization, whether it be with their diversity practices, whatever the culture of the organization may be, unless a leader is able to embrace and understand not only their people, but all their stakeholders, because you're under scrutiny. And that really and so following on Frida's point as well, and Irma's, the topic of mentorship is super important.
Very.
I mean, I've mentored for decades. I've been part of formal mentoring organizations. I mentor informally. And I really believe it's that confidence that mentorship gives. Because like you were saying, Irma, you have to be true to yourself on this journey. And you know what you want. More and more today, young young people who are on their journey of growing within their own organizations are also all about value and purpose. So as a leader, you really need to give them, to have systematic changes within your own organization to give access, whether it be to mentors, to coaches, to sponsors, because they all play a very different role. But most importantly, and I think we touched on this, is access to role models.
Yeah.
Because when you see women leading at the top and having a life and having a family and having the time to pursue their passions and leisure activities, that's when you see that I'm not going to be lonely at the top. Others have made it. I can too. And I still recall when I first arrived to Dubai 2 decades ago, and my role model was Sheikha Lubna Al-Qasimi, and she was in government. So Sheikha Lubna was the epitome of a successful woman in leadership, whether it was in government and she had a corporate role. Today, when you look around, there are numerous role models, and the diversity is so broad. It's ethnic, it's cognitive in terms of age. And this really brings me to the point and the conversation that I would like to frame on this committee. And we've started to have these panel discussions. Public companies today, globally, are facing growing investor pressure to improve diversity amongst the ranks within their own organizations. So this really underpins this greater awareness that we see today on the need to address environmental, social, and governance issues that we all refer to as ESGs. So the external pressures that companies are facing today are from institutional investors, from activist shareholders, and from potential employees and customers who want to see this increase in the representation of women on the corporate boards, at C-suite level, across leadership, as well as the topic of equal pay, gender parity. So this affects if and how companies address diversity issues. So I think the whole explosion of the importance of ESG, you're under scrutiny as an organization.
Yeah.
You can no longer not be part of these conversations. So I would like to focus on the S and the G in ESGs and really talk about the governance in diversity, so having at that level on your board, but also building that pipeline across every level of the organization and owning it as a leader to actually commit to parity across every level of your organization.
Yeah.
And I'll actually pass it over. I think Anusha wants to say something. And a little bit later, I'd like to share some of the key findings on one of our recent panels on women on boards and what came out of that discussion.
No, actually, I was just going to ask you a question because, we've been talking about leadership and the extreme importance of mentors and role models. But we also know that most organizations from a gender perspective start to, there is a point in a lot of women's careers where they start getting out of the corporate world.
They drop in that funnel.
Correct. And you start seeing a bit of a pyramid at the top. How, so part of the conversations you want to have as you address the various topics. What about bringing those women back into the workforce? Is there a role to re-engaging with a large swath of people who are extremely talented and competent, but have had circumstances that have made them to take different career choices, where they may not have been following their true selves, right? How do you get them back in the conversation? How do you bring them back? Because that, I think, there's a time where you will have to obviously nurture the new generation that's coming in and continue to have them grow. But we already have a whole swath of people who could potentially just come back into the conversation quite quickly.
And we were having a conversation earlier, Frida, about, the pandemic has accelerated the need for reform.
Yeah.
So we were talking about, in the past, we were told, get a seat at the table. If there isn't a seat for you, bring your folding chair. We've all read so many books and we've listened to so many speakers tell us that. But Frida, you raised the important point earlier about remote working. So the way we work is changing. You're always going to have a seat at the table because you can just log in and virtually be present in meetings. And I think for career women who have young families, the ability to share, I think, Anusha, you were talking about, the shared responsibility of both parents, because you've got this flexibility. And more corporations today are acknowledging the need. I was speaking to someone in the consulting world, MD of Accenture, Alexia, I'm going to mention your name, and he very proudly told me that some of the policies that he took upon himself, and they're not just global, it's regional, he wanted to thank his team, leadership, and across the organization for a fantastic year of great productivity. And he took it upon himself before anyone asked for it to say that I would like to ensure that everybody with children, man or woman, that needs to care for their children, that needs the support due to homeschooling, we're going to reimburse you as an organization. These conversations need to be had. They need to be had so that other leaders who are not opposed to it, but may not have been so creative. And what does that cost the organization?
And something else that organizations have been doing, exactly to build upon what Anusha has said, is starting formal re-entry programs for women. That is absolutely something that is being pursued and implemented at Caterpillar, as well as multiple other organizations that I'm aware of. You have to recognize that there's different paths that women especially have to take. They have demands that are unique to them. And we need to encourage women to follow that path, but it has to be at the right time also, right? And these formal reentry programs, which absolutely can be a topic of discussion for this committee, encourage women to get back into the workforce. Otherwise, I can guarantee you that pyramid that Anusha referenced will continue always to be a pyramid moving forward unless we essentially formalize our efforts to make an outreach to those ones.
And that's a conversation within itself. And I really think it's a topic that we must pursue. And we welcome feedback from our audience today. If that's a topic that they would like to contribute to, be part of, please do reach out to us. I think, Frida, you wanted to add.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big topic because what Anusha is talking about is about reintroducing already educated, knowledgeable and experienced, in this case, women who have potentially been working from home or not working for 5-10 years and then reintroducing them, building on what we can do with government instances here. What you then moved on to, which is very passionate for me, is of course we were part of a work trend index report to see how the remote work has changed things. And there was quite broadly, I think, a discussion. Is it an inhibitor or is it an equalizer? And I mean, is this remote working? And what we found in that one was that first of all, the lines are blurring. You know, where do you work doesn't matter so much. And this meeting fatigue about the fact that you're in a meeting all the time and you tend to drag your work week out from 5 days to 7 days because you don't have the natural commute, you don't have the natural break. Actually, all the video conferencing tools that you have today are actually building in AI now to reduce the meetings and give you that break artificially. But what was interesting, Laudi, was that from a women's perspective was that it didn't actually matter where you worked. So if you were in the old days not invited to the room, or if you were in the old days, let's say it was a physical meeting in Dubai and you had colleagues around the world that were based in other countries, they had to join over a video conference. But now everything is a video conference. So it was more inclusive. And everybody had to use the technology to be part of the meeting. And you have functions like raising your hand, and everybody had to be heard. And we actually saw that it was an accelerator. We promoted people during this time. You didn't have to move to a certain country to get a certain job because you were working from home. You could get promoted anyway. And I think that's a very, very big thing. The other thing that I feel, which is building on what you said about Accenture, is that in our case, which I felt really grateful about, and I think, again, it goes back to the responsibility of the corporation, what you want to put in place for rules. But they said, we understand you have to do homeschooling. We understand you won't have time to do homeschooling and be in a business meeting. We are going to give you parental COVID leave to So it was not on your vacation days. It was a bit like parental leave. And personally, because I have a big job and 2 kids who are in school, I took 2 days per week. And I split it. So sorry, I took 1 day per week. My husband took 1 day per week, and we split it in 2 half days. So that was like the morning slot from 9 to 12. Very practical.
This is music to
And
my
then
ears.
I could do mathematics or English or whatever
That's
with
great.
my daughter.
Yeah.
And then I went back to the
and still be so productive. So on that point, so I was one of the old school corporate career executives where we lived off an airplane, expanding business across the Middle East, Turkey, India, etc. So traveling constantly, having a young family, it meant that you had to be super organized, right to the point of who's eating what for lunch on the fridge, right to the point that I still remember my son, who's now 23, was probably about 8 years old, and I had a global CEO in town and a board traveling with him, and Jonathan had a fever that morning. And one of the things that I did very, very consciously, which I'm so thankful that women in senior roles today do not have to do, was I never allowed my organization to see that being a mother was ever an obstacle to my performance. So that was hard work. So I recall going, okay, what am I going to do? My husband was traveling at the time, and I called a neighbor who we shared car lifts with. She enjoyed being at home with the children. And she said, Lottie, don't worry, I'm coming to your place to look after Jonathan. So I think reaching out for that support.
network.
But today, that's all very different. You would not dream about not telling, your leader that I'm not available for half a day or whatever. I have to take a
I have to
child.
bring this back actually to Irma's point about thriving in a corporate environment. I think if we don't provide remote working, if we don't provide as corporations work-life balance, if we don't provide empowerment to work from whatever place, it's your work space, it's not your workplace. And you will actually not be able to hire the talents of the future because they will simply not join a company that doesn't give them this sort of flexibility. And that's why I think they leave. Then they will leave if they don't get the...
So as a mother of a 21-year-old daughter, I was observing her journey of applying. So she's about to graduate from university. So clearly she had myself as a working career mum and a very loving mum and a very giving mum. So she actually saw the challenges I faced, how I overcame them. But she's so value and purpose driven, like everyone of her generation. When I see her applying for corporate roles, the first thing she's doing is researching that organization, researching to see if the values of the organization align with her own. It's no longer about, I take what I get given. They absolutely know what they want to do. They want to make sure that they have this balance. They want to make sure this alignment. So I think the alignment of purpose and strategy with profitability for a corporation today, they're not mutually exclusive. And you can no longer hide. You can't greenwash and pinkwash. You were talking about data that Microsoft released. This whole ESG data and frameworks and indices and gender equality indices, etc., they're real. And there are people and stakeholders that are actually observing and reading and making decisions, whether they're a customer, whether they're a potential employee, whether they're an institutional investor. They're making their decisions based on these ESG factors. And I feel that this is exactly what we're going to see more and more of in the region. There are so many global examples of best practices, BlackRock refusing to, underwrite any IPOs that don't have at least one woman. And I think since then it's now 2 women on their boards, the UAE government mandating this journey, and this change is real. And as a corporation, and as a corporate leader that fails to acknowledge the changes that are happening around us, it's absolutely going to impact your bottom line and your ability to attract, whether it's foreign direct investment or investors in general.
Well, and just if we take it back to the point on whether women were disadvantaged or was it an accelerator for growth, I think the other side of the coin is that women took the brunt, or the social brunt, I think, of the pandemic, right? Because they're the major part of the family that takes care of the kids or the housework. So they've had to take on more responsibilities while still trying to do all those Zoom calls and answering those emails and doing the work. So I think there's two sides of the coin on that discussion, and whether you're organized, and the organization seems to be, I think, the decider of which side of the coin you fall on, right? If your organization is very supportive and you have those 12 weeks, or you have, your somebody to help covered by the organization. Others didn't have the same support, so they've had to deal with the two of them, and I think it hasn't been easy for. It seems like women kind of fell into either bucket.
Did you see the results that came out? I think a couple of days ago, I read a statistic on corporates in the region. About 88% of professionals are actually looking for another job.
Yeah.
So we have to ask ourselves why.
Yeah.
And these are not just women; these are men.
And there goes the why. Right?
And there goes the why.
There goes the why.
And that goes back to a point that came out of a key takeaway of one of our earlier panel discussions, where one of our panelists, who's very focused on the future of work, was saying that the Middle East has a significant opportunity to win in this current reinvigorated talent war. So how do you keep and retain employees, not only attract the new ones coming in, but retain your best talent? So when I saw that statistic, 88%, that's significant. So change has to happen. And I think these conversations must happen, and they must continue, and we need to continue talking about them.
There's a lot that I think, and we're just about to touch the surface, and I think we can go on for hours, but we'll go into the Q&A session now, because I think there's questions that are coming in, and some of them are really, really interesting that I think we need to address. So I'll shoot the first one over to you, Greg. So Leah's asked, what are the views of men on the subject, and how can they be better prepared to accept women at senior levels? And what are the current stumbling blocks in creating gender equality? And I'll just add on to that a little bit, is why are you participating in this Women in Business Committee? And how can you relate to any of the circles that we were talking about, and you're contributing to the conversation? So what do you think about all of this?
I think that's a great question. It's a question that I've gotten quite a bit over the last, since I've joined the committee. And I always answer it in two ways. One is from a personal perspective. I'm a girl dad. I'm a dad of two wonderful girls. So I want to play a role in the discussion that will help them when they are getting to the work field, so that they find a much more equitable workplace. So that's it comes from a place of passion. But then there's another aspect to it. I mean, if you look around the table, I'm the only man here, acknowledged.
And you're going to
and this is by design, and it's the only room that I've been in where I'm the only of something where it's a good thing.
Yeah.
Because normally it's not a good thing if I'm the only one in the room, right? And so I know what it's like, or I can empathize with being the only one in the room, being in a underrepresented group in the room.
Yeah.
And how do you bring that to the conversation? And how do you help steer the conversation to help better for the next core group that is coming up? So I think for me, it's about having allies.
Yeah.
Being a male ally to these wonderful women in business, and whether it's on an official basis or unofficial, being part of a network that can help drive these discussions, not only with women, but with other men.
And that's powerful, Greg.
And you need that.
That's powerful. And I think that's exactly what we need, because the discussion is about men and women. And, men play a very significant role in this discussion, because when you look at the global statistics as well as regional statistics, the percentage of leaders at the top and their gender, it's very skewed.
Yeah.
So we need the support of the senior business men as leaders to actually pave that way and drive the change.
Absolutely. And it brings a different perspective to the table in the dialogue. And so every little bit helps push the agenda forward.
And I'll move to another question. Anusha, you touched on challenges that you faced as an entrepreneur. And I mean, Greg, you can also relate to this as well. So We have a question here on what are the challenges you faced and what advice would you give? And I know this is like
It's like a whole conversation.
I know this is how long is a piece of rope, but if you could
Tune in to next time.
we have a whole series of conversations on this, guys. Sign up for this. But if you can give somebody one piece of advice, like you took the decision to take this journey, what's your one piece of advice?
One piece of advice, and I think what has really helped me is having a strong support system around you. Everything you're going to do, and it doesn't necessarily apply just to the corporate, to a startup world, but to the corporate world as well. Everything you're going to do, you're going to face obstacles, but you need to have people around you that support you. In my case, it is a very strong support system at home, and it's a very strong support system in the office, in the sense that I can rely on my team to get things done, right? So you can never, my view is, you can never do this on your own. You definitely cannot start a business on your own. And as women, we tend to be very reserved in trying to ask for help because we want to show that strength. And for some reason, it's taken as a sign of weakness when you ask for help, which should absolutely never be the case. But I think in order for you to be able to do all the things that you are required to do as a founder, you need to have people who will help you along that journey. So one piece of advice, without turning this into a whole conversation, is to make sure that you're surrounded by the people who will elevate you, who will be there to pick up where you will not be able to, and who bring a skill set that you may not have, and whom you can rely on and trust implicitly.
Incredible.
And I echo that. And I think it's you have to actually have the mindset that you don't have to be in it alone. No one has ever actually become so successful on their own. Reach out to that trusted support and actually build that support. And if I may, Noura, that brings me to answer that question as well.
Yes, good.
Have a mentor.
Yes.
Mentors are important at every stage of your journey, both personally and professionally. And I think access to a mentor, in addition to building your network. So I think one of the pieces of advice I often give to young female professionals, and I see my own daughter doing it now at a very early age before she's even entered the workplace, it's start building and powering those connections, because men do it exceptionally well and women don't leverage their connections enough.
That's really true.
But I'm happy somebody asked the question, so that means we will have another conversation on this, and we will get much deeper into the discussion.
So many, I can tell you, there's so many questions coming in, but three of them have come in at the same time. One is a comment on accountability and mentorship and leadership and nurturing growth. So, someone, Natalie, is saying that female role models currently sharing their experience and advice with younger women professionals is essential. And that confidence in organizations help support that growth. We had a question say, do you believe companies are really held accountable for their actions? And how do you make, and I'll bring this one up, how do you make progress in the diversity agenda more measurable? And is accountability key for organizations if you want to see real progress? And this is a big one. So Frida,
it goes a little bit on thing, I think, what I talked about earlier about the corporate responsibility and what you can do. And I think you can do a lot. You can put in programs. You can put in scorecards. You can say that in every interview you have to interview a diverse candidate. I think we did a lot of change. We went from kind of a know-it-all organization to a learn-it-all. So it's very much on that growth mindset and bringing energy and passion and a learner mindset into the game. I think we can, as an example, we have to have a training for unconscious bias. We have to have, we have a program that talks about diversity and inclusion. So if you are a manager in our environment, and I think this is something that every corporation can implement, is that we do actually have like a manager excellence community that we call Model Coach Care. So we actually meet in a manager forum. We discuss these challenges in a trusted environment, and we are in the end being rewarded if we are a good leader or people's manager in the end, and we give these show arenas and role model opportunities. So you cannot only be a senior leader if you're not caring about diversity and inclusion. You cannot just be, let's say, the best salesperson or the best technology manager.
You need to take responsibility.
I'll say
yes.
yes.
You want to
No,
build
absolutely. So I think, to that question of accountability, and to both Frida and Laudi's point earlier about how corporations have to change. So I think it really does, for accountability purpose, it has to be set at the very top and then driven down. And that is really what will drive accountability. And I think the sooner organizations start accepting the notion of the triple bottom line, because the bottom line is profit for organizations. Nobody is going to say against that. That is the bottom line. But it's a triple bottom line environment now. It's not just about the profit. It is about the profit, but it's also about your purpose. Are you making a positive contribution to the world or not? If you want that talent that you're achieving for, it has to be about not just the profit, but about your purpose and about the people as well. Are you having a positive impact on your people or you're not? If you're not embracing that, and if leadership is not driving that triple bottom line, we're about profit, we're about purpose, and we're about people, and that accountability will not.
And you can measure on talent turnover. You can measure if people start to leave, like Laudi said, for why do they change?
And it goes beyond. So following what Frida and Irma are saying, absolutely, the policies have to be there, but it goes beyond that. It's about the purpose. And if the purpose is not embedded at the core of your business strategy, and if it's not aligned, you're not going to achieve the results. It's not something where we make an announcement today and there's a press release and this is what we're doing and look how good we are. But when you actually delve deeper into the data, which you're doing in your own organization, that will actually tell you. And that's when you become accountable. And on that point, I really want to raise the point that it is not an HR challenge to address. And you rate that. So it is not. So I think organizations are starting to understand it's not a policy that I write and I hand it over to HR and expect HR to deliver results. The tone, as we all say, begins at the top. And the culture of an organization is set at the top. And we at 30% Club MENA have actually worked with consulting firms to deliver this toolkit which helps organizations to improve gender parity at every level of their organization. And the leaders that have reported back to us success stories and improvements in terms of that gender parity are the leaders that owned the implementation and the execution. So I have a really good example of someone in a family office, which is very challenging to do in family offices in the region. And she actually took ownership of this toolkit. And she kept in touch with me and she said, Laudi, I thought I was doing a great job within our own diversified conglomerate of a group. But when I actually went through the factors and the areas in the toolkit, I discovered I was only 40% of the way. So she personally set a target. So a very smart goal that was measurable and specific and had a date that she would get to 70% within a certain number of months and 100% by the end of it. And she absolutely achieved that. And she became a role model. So more of these role model organizations and leaders need to be heard, need to be seen. And I feel have an obligation to share with their peers what worked.
This is a great point, right? Because I think often we don't hear about these success stories enough. And part of this committee and part of what the club is doing is bringing that platform where we can hear these things. Hear the success stories. I made these changes and here are the concrete impact it had on my business or my division. And I think hearing these stories can inspire others, can inspire other leaders to say, you know what, I can take this on because I can map a direct impact to my bottom line or to these other targets that have been set.
And more importantly, Greg, on the point of impact, how do you as an organization measure your impact? What are the KPIs that you're benchmarking? What's the framework that you're using? And this is real data that becomes extremely valuable to share with your wider stakeholders.
That's very true. All of the conversations that we're having today and we want to have with the committee is driven by data and driven by information that you can find in the market. Just on the point of purpose-driven, PwC runs a survey every year called Hopes and Fears, and we interview, a couple thousand people in the workforce on what they see or what they want to see happen in, the change that they want to see. And a large percentage, and most of them are younger kids, so like your daughter, a lot of them are looking to join organizations that are purpose-driven. And if they don't feel that the purpose doesn't match their ethos or what they want to see in life, they will choose not to join that. So you're losing out on a potential pool of talent that can really drive your your bottom line. So I think obviously there's a lot. We're at the top of the hour and we have a lot of questions that are still coming in.
Noura, if I may just make one point,
please.
You're being too humble about PwC. So we all know that recently PwC established the Action and Diversity Council. And so they've actually made it an intentional decision to bring in other corporates under the umbrella of what can we do together? How do we share this data? And I think when this collaboration, and I think it's actually the responsibility of leaders to collaborate with others, and collaboration is the key to impact.
Yes, you need to be a purpose-driven, organization in order to bring in the people. But I want to say thank you all to the committee and thank you to everyone that's joined us today. It's been an amazing discussion and we can go on for hours and there's still so much to say. And we'd love for you to join our conversations and share your input and thoughts. So click that link in the chat and make sure you register for upcoming events and discussions at the Capital Club. And if you want more information on the Capital Club, and please reach out to any of us in the committee.
Absolutely.
If you want to share your thoughts as well, we'd love to hear from you, and we'd love.
Can we continue to answer the questions remotely after this?
Yes, we can. And there's a lot of questions that have come in, so we can reach out to each of them individually.
And if there's a theme developing around any of them, we can have a separate session as well.
I think that would be good to respect all the questions.
No, that's a good idea. I think what's good to see is that the discussions that we have in mind are all very relevant and they're very, they're coming through all the questions. So I'm happy that we're addressing all the right points. And I'm sure there's a lot more to say. But thank you very much. And thank you to the Capital Club for giving us the space to have these conversations and to host this discussion and many more discussions to come.
And without this platform, we would not be able to host these discussions both in person and online. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, well done.